All right, so to discuss the just passed petroleum industry bill, we've got Honorable Henry Wawamba, who joins us from Abuja. He's a member of the Committee on the PIB. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today on the program. Can you hear me, Honorable?
I can't hear anything.
Oh, okay. All right, we'll just sort that out and then get you on, you know. So, all right, guys, let's I thought that was already done, but yeah. Okay, so we'll have him take a look at some of those provisions, because already in the daily you see some reactions just coming through about this bill. It's taken this long to pass, but apparently it's not everyone that accepts all the provisions.
Well, there's always that win some, lose some angle to every issue, you know, in our world. Looking at some of those provisions, the host communities development thing is definitely crucial. How does that really tie with the proposition of the federal government about reclaiming some of the landed property in the Niger Delta? You know, all this we're going to clean up program of the federal government, which the vice president had taken the lead on to a large extent. How is that tying in to all of this? Is that 3%, 5%, or whatever percentage has been approved in the laws? Is it enough to deal with the issues? How will, there are so many questions, guys. How will that, you know, fund be dispensed and all of that? So those are so many issues. I want to just hope that the laws also have some form of methodology. We understand those two commissions have been set up to the effect, you know, upstream commission, downstream commission and all. How will those tie to the host communities? Those issues are there.
Okay, well, let's go again. I think Honorable can hear us now. Good morning. Can you hear us now?
Very good morning, Chamberlain. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. All right, then. So after several years, the PIB has eventually been passed. But I don't know if you've seen some of the reactions already. Some persons not too happy with some of the provisions. So just go ahead. Give us your perspective of the version of this bill and what went down before it was passed.
Thank you. Very good morning to the team in Lagos. As you know, the Parliament has been trying to pass this bill for at least 15 years now. And so we are very proud of the work that we have done. We think that it's a bill whose time has come, particularly the way it ties into our national conversations with regard to our developmental strides in economy, earning of foreign exchange and what have you. The truth of the matter is that the fossil industry, the extractive industry, particularly the dirty fuels like oil, are products that have, if you will, an expiry date. In the next 2 to 3 decades, if we don't do whatever it is that we need to do, I mean, we're just going to be carrying a form of energy when the rest of the world has moved on to cleaner and more efficient forms of energy. And so the Petroleum Industry Bill has always been at the forefront. In the 9th Assembly, we did start with a legislative agenda that put this at the fore. Of course, when COVID came, we revised our legislative agenda and put health. But if you go to the section on economy, the top piece of legislation that the 9th House of Representatives had put on that we must pass, come what may, is the Petroleum Industry Bill. Indeed, our leadership had actually even committed the House of Reps on different occasions to dates and timelines to say, look, by this time we're going to have it done. It's not a new piece of legislation. We worked on it on the 8th Assembly. It wasn't signed. 7th Assembly worked on it. This time around, it has come as an executive bill. And yesterday on the floor, we passed all 319 clauses, including the controversial Clause 240 that talked about the host community development fund.
Speaking about that host community, there's been, you know, that argument which went back and forth as to who do they describe as the host community and then to benefit from that development fund? Because there are those who suggest that, I mean, okay, maybe you should just give us that perspective. Who were those that were described here
Okay.
as the host community?
Once an oil resource is domiciled in your land, you are a host community. If there's any kind of drilling going on in your land, you are a host community. Installation of an oil facility, you are a host community. I think what we need to differentiate is the difference between a host community and an impacted community, because you may have oil resource far away from where you reside, but the oil infrastructure passes through, let's say, for instance, a pipeline, your community, and if there's any activity of oil pollution and all of that, you become an impacted community. So, but the provisions of the PIB deal squarely with those communities that have either the resources or the facilities domiciled in and within their environment.
So, the host community, the impacted community who pipelines pass through their area also benefit from that host community development fund. Is that right?
They are not classified as host community for now. There's a different set of protocols that cater to when you have impact on the environment, no matter where it is. Of course, you know that the Ministry of Environment, NOSDRA, and DPR do form a joint investigation team to go and assess the level of severity and all of that. What the Host Community Trust Fund seeks to do is to actually ensure that the failure that we have seen over time, particularly with regards to the intervention that is happening at the level of the community level, be it the 13% derivation or some of the other interventions in the NDDC, amnesty program, and all of those interventions that government has been having in the time past that have not really been able to translate to the kind of development that we want to see on ground. The host community provision is some kind of an inclusive arrangement that brings the community at the center of the conversations of what is important to them, what they want to see in terms of development, and how to go about it. So they're actually going to be in the committee that forms what they want and drives how it is implemented.
Okay, well, Honorable Tajuddin Yusuf also joins us on the line on this matter. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today on the program. So, yeah, yes, the PIB has been passed, but all those debates that went down, just get into that part now where we're talking about who qualifies. I mean, there's host community, there's impacted community, which we're getting some explanation. Could you shed some light as well on your impressions about how this went on?
Good morning. First of all, the mere fact that the PIB has got to this level of passage is commendable. However, if you follow the debate in Senate, there was some confusion from the South. I have reservation about the definition of host community and a party community. I'm not comfortable with certain things there. But the beauty of democracy is that if you're a minority, you have your same majority have his way. I am not confident. I feel that we're setting a dangerous precedent. Don't forget that when the PIB came to light and became an issue of discussion, there was hydro something bill. Those who are the Niger State and other states where you have hydro power being generated call for such a bill for themselves. Does it mean that everywhere the national grid passed through, that's electricity pole and what have you, will become impacted community that will benefit from whatever is given to the host community on power generation? That's my reservation about it. I just feel that we should not do things that tomorrow will boom around and set us on a cycle that we will not be able to come out of.
Wait.
Then on the
Are you suggesting that if facilities or installations they go through a location or domicile there, even though the crude resource is not in that particular location, they also have some sort of benefit? Because we just heard now that they don't qualify as host communities, that they are host communities, that they are impacted communities. Do they all have the same kind of benefit?
It's a matter of semantics. It was when I mean, the process of lawmaking is a long haul. So I know a lot of things went into it. That's why I'm saying that, yes, with time we have been able to get to this level is commendable. But I'm just saying that this thing has not, we have not seen the end of this. Maybe when we leave years later, what have you, but that's the beauty of Parliament too. But others will come to reject the law. I'm just expressing my own reservation that that should not have been an issue. And the frontier exploration, I'm challenged with it. I am aware by history, and everybody can go and search. There's never been a time that government votes money for exploration of oil in the Niger Delta. The first commercial crude oil we got in Nigeria, the company involved spent their money until they got to that level. And if we are, because the intention of PIB is to take government reasonably off some of these things. But if we are creating an avenue for certain resources that, I'm sorry, will become slush, I feel it is better for companies or businesses to be allowed on their own to make investment in exploration as it's being practiced now. So I am of the opinion that it's good we got to this level, let it be passed. But these areas, TJ Yusuf, were not too comfortable with, but the majority has this way, and I believe that it should still be looked into. If you remember, before you stopped me, I was drawing correlation between the PIB and hydroelectric power generation community bill that was proposed by Southern State. I am asking you a question. If we say everywhere the pipeline pass through the community that has some benefit, do we see everywhere that the national grid pass through to will benefit from such thing?
Okay.
That's my...
All right, so Honorable Oba, could you give us your perspective on this point that he just raised?
Well, I completely agree with him. It's a very dynamic piece of legislation, and we do expect that in years to come, we're going to have to sit and review and look at what's been working for Nigeria and what has not been working for Nigeria. The only thing that is driving the thought behind what has been crafted in the PIB is, one, the investment required in the oil industry is very huge. And the second thing, obviously, is that it's a long lead business. It's a long-term business. It's not a business that is not just like buying and selling. You have to have deep pockets. You have to have staying power. You have to have technical capacity and all of that. And, of course, over the time that we have had oil in Nigeria, what we're considering is there a way that we can make things easier? The PIB that you have today that has been passed by Parliament, I see it as a win-win situation. Some may argue that it's perfect, others may argue that it's not perfect, but it takes us from a no-law situation to a situation where we have some kind of regulation around the oil and gas industry. After all, the oil industry is still the golden goose, or the goose that lays the golden egg, and to leave that level of uncertainty. The host community is a critical piece of the PIB. It was actually a subset, a whole section in the 8th Assembly when we broke it down into 4 parts. It was one whole part itself. And even on this time around, after the public hearings, we actually took the PIB to the regions. We went extensively and toured the Niger Delta, and we sought to have their opinions so that we can capture a middle ground, because the provision that came with the executive proposal was at 2.5%. But when the technical committee, both in the House and the Senate, met, we found a middle ground, 5%. And of course, yesterday, the two chambers were not able to harmonize because, again, when you take a report of Parliament to plenary, anything can happen in plenary, and that's exactly what played out. But there are other very important pieces to the PIB that we must not lose sight of. We looked at the administration issues, the governance issues, the fiscal policies surrounding the oil and gas industry, and we tried to incentivize investment and at the same time not shortchange Nigeria. If we need to come back to this piece of legislation sometime in the future, definitely that's what Parliament is for. We make laws, we review laws, we amend laws. And I'm not going to be surprised if this will be subjected to further legislative fireworks. But the most important thing is that we will, for the first time, joining the Committee of Nations that will say that we do have, or the Parliament has passed a petroleum industry bill to regulate the sector, and it has been hailed globally since Parliament achieved this feat yesterday. We do hope that the President will sign this bill into law, because the executive proposal that came contains over 700 amendments in our bid to ensure that we capture every input to strengthen and bring out a watertight piece of legislation.
That you said earlier, Honorable, and I think it is something very significant that should be given due attention. You drew a difference between host communities and impacted communities. It is not unlikely that host communities may not be as impacted by the activities of the petroleum industry operators as the impacted communities. To be specific, how well does this law factor in the interests and concerns of impacted communities?
Like I said, we already have protocols that govern, let's just take oil pollution, for instance. If a pipeline is passing through your community, and for some reason, let's even not say it was vandalized, but maybe due to the age of the asset or corrosion, it becomes degraded to the point where there's spillage in the community and impacts the environment. Nigeria already has a set of protocols that govern this. What we try to do is not to have a PIB that will answer everything. If there are areas where we have arrangements between the National Oil Spill Detection and Response Agency, the Department of Petroleum Resources, and the Ministry of Environment, and we have already identified how to categorize and respond to environmental impacts that are happening outside of the host communities. We will deploy those sets of protocols. But for the host communities, there was a lot of agitation, and it was necessary to actually focus on that and make sure that we accommodated, because we sought to produce a legislation that will be a win-win on all sides. And that's just what it is. We have looked at the host community issues from that perspective. If, like I said, down the road, we will need to broaden or expand to cover other areas for to capture impacts and all of that. We will also, I mean, this Parliament has we have proven that we have the political will to commit ourselves to a piece of legislation that has eluded us for over 15 years. And this time around, this is a piece of legislation that is in the interest of our country. I am a member of the PDP. I am a member of opposition. But I'm here today saying that the PIB is one piece of legislation that is good for us as a country. And I urge Nigerians to take a look at it. This is the document that is being celebrated. I took the liberty to bring this document to channels today, so Nigerians can see the volume of work that has been done by Parliament. This is the document that will be going off, hopefully, if we can go into conference and agree on the gray areas that seem to not be aligned between the House and Senate. That's the document that we'll be sending off to Mr. President to sign off on.
Honorable, clearly, just as you said, there have been for and against to the passage of the bill since it came out. So the natural question that comes to mind is, how are you taking on board this, the various angles, especially the propositions as against the bill that has been passed, which is going to the National Assembly? Is there a timeline for dealing with these issues? Are they so significant? I mean, you already made it clear that it's a middle ground. What if the opposition is so strong?
Well, the bill-making cycle has actually been completed, save for the fact that the provisions that the House of Representatives adopted yesterday for the host com provided for 5%, and then in the Senate, they voted for 3%. Save for that fact, I would have been actually committing and saying and telling us that it's good to go to Mr. President. Unfortunately, what will now happen is that there will be a conference committee that will be established in National Assembly, 5 members from the Senate, 5 from the House of Representatives. These 10 wise men will go in and take a look at what the gray areas are, harmonize it, bring the report back to Parliament, and it's just going to be mere procedural. We will adopt and send. The bill in itself hopefully would be signed. I do have a lot of optimism with the sheer volume of work that has gone into the bill. It was actually well researched, a very good technical team at the back, the technical committee in Parliament, good back office, good teams, a lot of work, support from the executive side, particularly the NNPC, from the minister to the GMD to the executive secretary of the PTDF, all the consultants, and all the stakeholders. It's actually been robustly debated, exposed, input taken, and all of that. If at the end of all of this, it is signed off and we come to discover areas that are not working, we will come back to this same piece of legislation with amendments that will seek to correct those anomalies. So I just want to urge Nigerians to keep the faith, believe that the Parliament that set out to say, look, we will give you the PIB in the 9th Assembly has actually delivered on one of its legislative agendas. And if there's any very important piece of legislation really to us as a country, I think the PIB is it. And this is something that we are celebrating very seriously. If it's not perfect, we will look at it again. I can tell you, I commit myself from the 8th Assembly. I'm a ranking member of Parliament. And from the 8th Assembly, when I came in, I have worked, dedicated a lot of time and resources to open up myself to learn about the petroleum industry bill, to make sure that I'm part of the history making. And yesterday, history was made. If it's not perfect, we will correct those areas.
What happened during the 8th Assembly? I mean, you were part of the 8th Assembly. The current speaker was part of the 8th Assembly as well. And, you know, like you referenced, it was broken down into different parts, the PIGB and the rest. Of course, that PIGB eventually hit a brick wall. It wasn't assented to by the president. I mean, you've not passed it, as you said. It has not been harmonized just yet to be sent to the president. But to what extent did this current PIB build on what happened or the process at the 8th or during the 8th Assembly? What's the difference? Because, I mean, we're looking at it going to the president. What are the guarantees that this will not end the same way the PIGB ended during the 8th Assembly? So to what extent is this different, or did you build on the previous PIGB?
Let us remain optimistic. The main difference is obviously that in the 8th Assembly, it was a private member bill, and this time around it's a bill. All the reasons adduced by Mr. President for withholding his accent were already carried in the proposal that was sent to Parliament from the executive. So what we worked on was actually the executive proposal, and that's where we now started from. Where the executive stopped is where we now started from. And all we did was essentially to balance it out, to ensure that Parliament brings a piece of legislation that is in tandem with the time and is got all it takes to deliver the dividends that we have promised in the PIB. Recall that I said that the extractives, particularly oil, is got an expiry date. If we do not put the necessary investments that will bring about the turnaround in the next 2 to 3 decades, we'll be carrying all that oil and be like Venezuela. Venezuela has about 306 billion proven barrels reserve in the ground, second largest reserve, second to Saudi Arabia. But because of strict fiscal policies, no investment is going into Venezuela. And the truth about the oil industry is about investment. We came down as a country from 36 rigs to about 6 rigs operating in Nigeria today. Since I've been in Parliament, we have always predicated our budget from the MTEF on 2 million barrels or 2.2 million barrels production, and of course the benchmark price. If we get it right, investment will come in In the last 10 years, Nigeria has lost an opportunity for over $50 billion worth of investment, which means we're not really mining our assets, we're not drilling new acreages, no expansion is happening. Everybody is going to the same assets and just happy with what it is. If this PIB comes to play, I see a situation where Nigeria will be pushing OPEC to go beyond 2 million barrels and perhaps go for 4 or 5 million barrels per day production. And I can tell you that will lead to double-digit growth in terms of our budget and the economy. So this is something that we believe in. We have worked on it. The difference this time, obviously, being that it came from the executive and we worked on it. We took what they had provided to us, worked on it, and turned it into the document it is today. We believe what we have done is a lot of is an exhaustive job, but it remains to see if Mr. President will sign it this time or not. But also remember that President withholding his accent is not the end of the cycle for the bill. Parliament does indeed reserve the right to veto Mr. President. If we do believe that this piece of legislation is so critical to our national well-being, we can as well veto Mr. President and sign this bill into law.
Well, Honorable, we've hardly seen that happen, so I'm sure a lot of Nigerians would ask, is that really an option you are considering?
I refer you to the NDDC Act.
Okay, I mean, we saw the electoral bill during the 8th Assembly also, and people thought, will the National Assembly veto the president? But let's still talk about that process. So you said the one we had during the 8th Assembly was a private bill. This one is an executive bill. How remarkable is the difference? And some might wonder, was this a plan all along to have the executive actually champion this process and ensure that at least they set the tone for what they want to happen in that industry?
No, not at all. I wouldn't say that. I was a part of the technical committee in the House of Reps that worked on the bill in the 8th Assembly, and I think what happened there was an issue of time. We concluded it towards the tail, the ending of the Parliament, and of course, by the time Mr. President gave his reasons, he wrote back to Parliament and stated out his reasons. We actually tried to rally ourselves to see if we can address those reasons, but we just simply ran out of time.
Let's talk about the practicalities. I know this industry means different things to different people. The government, in terms of revenue, government agencies, in terms of regulation, the host communities, which you have referenced. I mean, I could talk about the IOCs, OPEC, which you also referenced. I mean, the countries that we do business with as well, and the everyday Nigerian. So let's begin with the government agencies, NNPC, DPR, PPPRA, Petroleum Equalization Fund. Clearly, this bill, if it is passed into law, will change their faces. How?
And that's a very critical piece of information, advance or progress made. So we have governance issues, we have administration issues, and we think if we get those two right, we would have laid a solid foundation to build on the rest. In terms of the administration of oil and gas, the NNPC Corporation as it is today, so the PIB is providing a two-tier a framework to adopt a two-tier regulatory framework. If you, the NNPC Corporation today will become, we have the commission and the authority. So you have some of the other government agencies that are going to be in the commission and doing all the regulatory works that you have, which is you have the DPR and all of that. And in the authority, you have NNPC PLC, which will become a private company that will be regulated by a board, and hopefully between the two structures, we'll be able to provide effective regulation to ensure that investments are managed in the interest of the country in the first instance, and obviously to make sure that we deliver for the stakeholders that are coming in and in addition also the host communities. That is what the proposal of the PIB is. That is where we spent, I believe, the least amount of time, because we had already done a lot of work in the 8th Assembly trying to look at the relationship between the Commission, the authority, and the NNPC structure as it is. The Petroleum Industry Bill does not provide for petroleum equalization, because we're looking at a deregulated market. So eventually, we will probably be seeing where market forces are playing out in determining the prices of petroleum products across Nigeria. It also does not recognize that we will continue with the current subsidy regime, because again, it's going to be an industry that will be regulated by open market forces, and what will happen is that economy and economics would drive what happens in the industry.
Well, there's still a lot to say about that one, but let me take it to Honorable Yusuf now. I'm wondering, Honorable Yusuf, how you think this PIB significantly impacts the fate of host communities specifically. I'm wondering how this new law will bring in a new regime of impact on host communities, given that it would seem that the proposed bill is taking into account the environmental impact of oil exploration. How does this law impact significantly differently from how the host communities and oil exploration impact has been previously?
It's a very straightforward thing. Before now, the companies, the IOC that operates in those communities, determine what they think the host community deserve. And it are the rules and caprices of whoever is responsible for that. And it is seen as a favor. So now you have a law that mandates and gives responsibility to certain resources to be flowed back into making sure that the environmental impact is minimized, if not eradicated. So I think if we handle responsibly and we do not do this normal thing of looking the other way of the law and compromise our system, it will possibly impact the people. It will be far, 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 far reaching than what we need to have right now. So I am positive about that. In as much as I want it to be more than that, because of years of neglect and neglectation that happened in those areas. Like I was saying earlier, the Senate, and even not just Senate, even House of members of the South Side that wanted a 5%. Initially, it was a 10% concentration. So, but let's see how the 3% is being managed. That will justify an amendment and what have you. Right? So for now, sincerely, I can say the law as it is as positive proposal.
You know, hitherto, I mean, just as you said, it would seem like maybe it was a favor, but at least it was something that the industry generally respected. But now the bill is making it clear that every licensee must rehabilitate and manage the effects of petroleum operations on their environment. The question then is, how do we ensure compliance with the law? A number of people would say there are several aspects of certain laws that are not given their due regard up until now. So what's the assurance that people have, especially of the host and impacted communities, that this law will be followed to the T?
First of all, what you are doing this morning, bringing to the fore these issues for Nigerians to hear. So being educated helps in telling the whole world that this is the institution of law. 2, the compliance or not compliance has to do with how committed those who do the responsibility of ensuring compliance do their job. We are not, a lot of time, we are not in lacking of good laws. Our challenge is the law being implemented? Are there consequences for flouting the law? If Mr. A flouts the law, is the full weight of the law, does it come upon him so as to serve as deterrent to others? So I believe that this time there should be a conscious effort to make sure that nobody play under the table. The host communities, those who are privileged by God to have these resources, have gone through a lot. So if after how many years of PIB, you have a PIB, what we can do to show good spirit is for us to make sure it is implemented to the letter. However, I'm not shying away from the fact that people will attempt and people will even undermine the law.
God, Honorable, what then do we do? We recognize that there are two commissions that have been set up to perform certain functions, the upstream commission and the downstream and midstream commission, regulatory commissions. But in the light or in the event that what you've said happens, when some people try to undermine the law or some people try to circumvent things, what do you propose?
The law. Until the law become a leveler, that whoever you are, you plant the law and you go contrary to what the law says, let the full wrath of the law come upon you. If we will not get out of this, it's not about Nigeria. Humans naturally tend to look for excessive liberty and abuse until it is known and become clear that there are repercussions for such tendencies. When you allow or encourage wrongdoing, you are giving impetus to others to join. So, yes, there are regulatory agencies that are set up, empowered by law, because if it is signed, it's now for you, media, Nigerian people, with the information at our disposal now, look at areas of compromise we have noticed and bring it to the fore. Then call the security agencies into doing their job. Why I ended my earlier comment with the fact that people will attempt, people will do. I don't want to pretend that because PIB now is a piece of legislation that has come from heaven, that Nigerians will not flout it. Even the law of God, human being flout it. So it is now the instrumentality of government to make sure that whoever goes contrary to this will face the wrath of the law. And unfortunately, for us as Nigerians, this, unfortunately, is the only cow meat. This is the only farm. This is the only means that the government gets revenue. But up to 60–70% of our revenue comes from oil. So it is not a sector we should toy with. And that's why I believe that's one of the reasons the PIB took this long. A lot of compromise coming to this law. A lot of give and take. Like I expressed some reservation in some areas, but we have a law now. It's our responsibility to make sure that the law is respected. Areas we are not comfortable with, we bring it back for amendment. That is done in other climes.
Honorable Nwawuba, talk to us about this other provision of the bill, which is the commercialization of the NNPC. Is that privatization?
So what that brings is, for the past 50 years, our oil industry has been running on a certain business model. And we've always taken the oil, exported it, and brought it back as petroleum products. And so what we were looking at in terms of the commission, the authority, is to regulate and put a set of framework that would govern upstream operations and at the same time take a look at the midstream and the downstream sector and open it up. And I'll give you an example. Under the administration, the fiscal constraints for gas production essentially is being removed. We want to incentivize. Remember that really what we are as a country is a gas country. Yes, we have gone in search of oil, but what everybody knows is that Nigeria, we have 200 and I believe it's about 206 TCF of gas reserves. And for a midstream sector, that is a whole industry that is available in terms of pipelines, fertilizers, petrochemicals, Everything, you look around the room where you are, everything you see there, from the furniture to the paint to the materials and all of that, is the petrochemical industry that can expand and boom. So we have set this two-tier regulatory framework that will open up this industry. We believe that Nigeria can actually use oil to get out of oil. You talk about diversification and all of that, build infrastructure. Where is the money going to come from? It's going to come from oil. And hey, this oil is going to last 30 years, 3 decades. Let's take it. So this is the time to put in the necessary framework in terms of regulation, the commission, the fiscals, the incentives. If I'm now, the hydrocarbon tax previously used to be about 85%. Companies' income tax, 30%. What is the middle ground? What can we say to an investor that can say, look, we can reduce your hydrocarbon tax so that when you come into the oil industry in Nigeria, you are sure of what your liabilities would be. You are sure, and there's certainty in the industry that, look, this is an industry that I want to play in, or an industry that, because capital looks for the most favorable climate. Capital in the oil business is not just going to come to Nigeria because we have proven reserves. No, it's going to go into the countries that are putting in the right policies that will attract the investment, protect both the government revenues and assure them, and also the, what is in it for the investors.
All right, Honorable Mawaba, I know that there was that back and forth about payments by host communities to, for damages to oil facilities during crisis. So what's the thinking of the House about that?
The thinking of Parliament on that essentially is that we don't want to hand down development to host communities. We want host communities to determine what they want and how they get it. We are making an extra effort to accommodate and make them comfortable. At the same time, we are asking for some responsibility, because if you talk to the players in the industry, they will tell you that some of the mishaps that you see in the industry are actually acts of willful vandalization. Like I said, we are creating a bill that will cater to all scenarios and give Nigerians a win-win situation. The law will come down hard on criminality, but at the same time, the law will seek to protect the interests of the host communities. After all, it is said that what we have in the ground is actually not an inheritance from our children. It's something that we're keeping in trust for them. Okay. So we have to act responsibly in terms of how we extract this oil, how we go back to remediate and put the environment back in a usable form that will benefit Nigeria and the generations that are
But you know, that comes across as though the drafters have at the back of their minds that it is the host communities that actually damage those facilities. So what happens, one, in the event that, look, it's not damaged by host communities, and then if they are not able to pay, what happens in that regard?
Well, acts of criminality would always, the long arm of the law would get to criminals, and the law would take its course. If I wouldn't know exactly what the provisions are in the criminal code in terms of damage to national infrastructure, and you're not able to make amends what you have damaged. But I do believe that our laws are strong enough to ensure that people who are caught in the act of vandalism, be it oil and gas infrastructure or other pieces of national infrastructure, are held accountable, and the law will take its course.
So what would you say as we wind down to those who say that, well, they're not exactly happy and not clear enough in terms of how the members of that host community development trust fund will be appointed? How will members, be drafted into the board, given precedents as to us not sticking to certain rules of appointing people into positions based on the law?
That's why it is important that Parliament is seen as a friend to the people. When we call for memoranda and ask people to come be a part of a lawmaking process, we open it up to a public hearing. In this particular piece of legislation, we did go around the region, try to engage the host communities in representative capacities. We talked to the leaders of thought, youth groups, faith-based groups, the elders, traditional institutions. We would normally go into a state and pick a courtesy call to the governor. The governor would assemble a team, state a position that this is what they would like to see and all of that. And we go through all of that bill-making or lawmaking cycle. And at the end of the day, we still have, and I'm not surprised, in any case, there's nothing you do that you will not have dissenting voices. But the thing is, what we need to know is that this is a very important piece of legislation that Nigeria has been trying to put out for decades. And finally, we have moved from a no-law situation to a situation where this Ninth Assembly has given Nigerians a petroleum industry bill.
Okay, just one more thing,
perfect, please,
if you could respond to this quickly as well.
One and all to reach back to Parliament.
So,
I'm available, I'm a member of Congress, and everybody is available. We will look at it, and hopefully we'll address those concerns.
All right, just as quickly as possible for this one. Will a member of an impacted community, or can a member of an impacted community be appointed into the Host Community Development Trust Fund?
I don't believe we provided for that. We believe we provided for members of the host communities. Impacted communities are things that we respond to and react to after an incident occurs. A host community is what we want to get as our benefit for hosting the oil or the natural resource in our community. There are two different clear distinctions. So what we have provided for are those members of the host communities to have a say on what they would like to see in terms of development of their communities.
All right, then, Honorable Henry Mawaba, member of the PIB committee, thank you for your perspectives today.
Thank you very much.
Honorable Tajuddin Yusuf, thank you very much as well for your time.
I would have loved to say something. Okay.
I'm sorry?
I would love to say something about the consequences of a vandalization in the host community.
Okay, just briefly, as quick as you can, please. Go ahead.
Okay, let me just say that you won't need to have any fear of vandals coming to this community if the host community commission does what it needs to do. Naturally, vandalism, if it does not exist, will be at very minimal. And the question you asked about if someone comes from outside of those communities to vandalize, we must define things in perspective. If it is a vandal outside the host community, how do we determine? So who do we hold responsible? Those are the areas that will require us to amend the law later.
Those are the points we were trying to get clarification on. Thank you very much as well. All right, well, back in a moment, we'll turn our attention to another matter entirely, so don't go away. Well, yes, we're turning our attention to security matters, and we're joined by Mr. Dennis Amakwe, a former state security operative. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program today.
Good morning.
Right, well, a lot unfolded yesterday, and still is today, we reckon, but part of what transpired, the attack on he's also known as Sunday Igboho, his place in Ibadan yesterday. The DSS eventually did speak, but looking at the circumstances and the information that they put out concerning who went there and persons they paraded, what impression do you have of this operation?
Well, once more, thank you for inviting me. It was a very good piece of intelligence work that, you know, the DSS had in their possession. And of course, when they go in there, they discover that what they knew was actually in existence, whereby weapons were all recovered from that premises. So, you know, like they say, if a diplomat or a non-state actor carries a gun, then he becomes a soldier. And in that kind of situation, they have to nip it in the bud, so to say.
You know, Mr. Makwe, I mean, we look at international best practices and standards about how some of these things, raids, operations are carried out. And not that one is being utopian here, but, you know, when that attack happened, people around there didn't know who they were. They thought they were just gunmen or non-gunmen. Some refer to them as such, not knowing where they were coming from. So there was that apprehension at the time. And then eventually there was that briefing. But if you look at some of the dailies here today, where some of the aides are saying that the person spoke French fluently, giving perhaps an impression that they might have been persons other than state actors or even, you know, authorized actors. Should these kind of things be preceded or followed by images, accounts of operations and how it went through, such that they are seen to have complied with the laws here, with best practices, so that people now are saying that, look, they didn't even know that they were DSS operative. They could have even shot back at them, because some suggest it lasted for about an hour, that there was a gun battle, not knowing who they were. People may be bound to defend themselves.
Well, you know that I'm very happy that the DSS actually came out to make that statement, so that we move away from that story of unknown gunmen who were speaking fluent French and stuff like that. That tells you how people actually misuse the social media, because who were those people? If the DSS didn't come out, it would have escalated into a different thing where they would say, oh, yes, it was unknown foreign Fulani men who were speaking French fluently, who came to attack Sunday in his premises. So I'm happy that they came out to clear that out, and of course also the arrested people who were paraded, because earlier it was said that they were kidnapped, you know. So these are all the kinds of, should I say, different kinds of stories that people put out to confuse the public.
You know, early in the day, you know, hours after that particular invasion, attack, operation, whatever term has been used, happened. I mean, we saw videos, people narrating what happened, you know, going around the house, taking shots of the home, gunshot, bullet holes in vehicles, you know, vandalization generally. And I mean, maybe that led credence to the unknown gunmen attackers, because people thought, would it be the DSS that would vandalize property this way? I mean, if it were to be an operation, or let me just ask you, I mean, the vandalism you saw, the bullet holes in the car and the rest, is that something the DSS will normally do in their operation?
Well, that story that they put out is not the modus operandi of the DSS. In fact, actually, when they went in there, they were actually shouting that this is the DSS, come out, open the gate. And, of course, what they received was gunshots, you know. So I think they were also ready to repel any kind of person that comes around there. But at least they should have. And it's doubtful when you look at it. It's not a situation where they'll be shooting a movie, you know, and then they carry camera along with them. And then, of course, as they are entering the place, they will be shooting the...
Yeah, but Mr. Makwe, we know these things. You don't have to be shooting a movie to have body cameras on you.
Yeah,
you don't have to. We see them everywhere else.
They did carry body cams, but
did they? They didn't?
No, they didn't. They didn't.
Oh, okay.
So this is not where people will demand that.
Because now...
we want to see pictures of
because
what
now,
actually happened.
That part where you say they shouted that this is DSS, it's arguable. People will argue, no, we didn't hear that. And some will say we did. So these are the things that they needed to avoid, this back and forth as to the mode of operation.
Maybe the DSS can go ahead and start acquiring some body cams so that people will not start mistaking them for others. But they actually returned fire because they didn't go there shooting into the place. There were some DSS officers that were wounded, you know, so they won't say that they even don't have arms in that house.
Yeah, you know, part of why we're asking about the mode of operation, so that people can understand. Because remember, because did you ask the EFCC chairman when he was here? There were images that circulated. Yeah, I think we remember asking him. Fake EFCC operatives went to an estate with a bus, a van, and a fake court injunction to take people's property out. So now, what if anybody just comes up, shows up in an apartment? This is DSS, open up. How do we know who's who?
You open up and find out. If you don't have any skeleton in your cupboard, you shouldn't be afraid of the law. You know, only people who have some skeleton in their cupboard will be scared of the law.
Mr. Amaku, was it out of place to have at least invited him, at least send him an invite with which he would either respond or not? Was there such a case?
This particular operation does not follow that pattern.
I mean, previously to the gentleman, was it ever a thing, you know, done that, you know, maybe Mr. DMO was invited to have a chat with DSS or something? Was there ever such a case?
No. This, like I said, this particular operation does not follow that kind of pattern. There were some intelligence reports that this guy is harboring weapons in his house. You know, I will not invite you and say, hey, come to our office, let's talk to you. We heard you have some weapons in your house. It doesn't follow that pattern, because
I want to
then you
Mr.
can hide it.
Yeah,
okay?
I understand what you're saying, but and I agree with that. But I want to also believe that Mr. Sunday Ademo didn't just become a person of interest yesterday. It must have been for quite a while. And I'm pretty sure that the DSS must have picked up on that kind of intelligence. That's the premise upon which I'm asking if there was ever a time that he was invited, just to at least nip this in the bud before he got to this level.
He has been a person of interest.
Was he ever invited during that time?
Well, there was no need because, you remember, Nigeria is a democracy. There's free speech. And people have been having speech, you know, their own speeches around the place. He had rallies in different parts of the West, but he has not, you know, but at the same time, there was information that this guy that has been having rallies is also harboring some weapons. And of course, they have to go for those weapons.
It reminds us of that joke where they talk about free speech may be guaranteed, but freedom after the speech.
It's not guaranteed.
So, like I said, a lot has gone out. We've seen videos, live streams, different accounts of this. I mean, Chamberlain referenced the French-speaking men that were said to have invaded his house. Just to be clear as well on the modus operandi of the DSS, they also said that the two people that were killed, their bodies were taken away. Is that what the DSS will normally do?
I don't know about that. What they paraded was the people that were arrested. I don't know about bodies being taken away. You have to remember about that particular statement, I think from somebody who is a patron or somebody who was saying about the French-speaking people. His numbers were more. He said how many people were kidnapped. He used that word. The wife of Sunday was also kidnapped. And of course, they came out to tell how many people were taken arrested, and of course, including a female. Maybe that's the woman that they were referring to as Sunday's wife. But I don't know about taking bodies away.
So the DSS will normally
It's not the modus operandi. To do what? To hide them or to bury them? No, I don't think that's the modus operandi.
Okay, I mean, it's just to get these details out there so people can at least hear from the different sides. But, I mean, people always make comparisons, and I'm sure you've probably seen some of them. People, on the one hand, are quite impressed that the DSS got intelligence, and they acted on the intelligence they said they got. And, I mean, you've seen people draw different inferences, talking about the banditry we are seeing, the spate of kidnapping, terrorism, and the rest, saying, so what happens to intelligence in that area? How often does the DSS get intelligence so that they can act preemptively, such that we don't see the spate of kidnappings we're seeing, the bandits attacks, even the killer herdsmen as well? So these comparisons have been drawn. So the question would be, how effective is the DSS also in those areas?
You should, you've been going through the news and you know how many people have been arrested, some areas that have been bombed, working with the Air Force and the Army. There's a synergy there that has, bring out a lot of results, especially recently after the change of service chiefs. So you will not know because there is no particular leader that they're looking for. But of course, you have had stories about commanders of either Boko Haram or ISWAP that have been neutralized. So the fight is on. I think I'm very happy particularly because this area where the whole country is moving towards flames, and then of course, gradually, we're trying to put a rein on it because before it was like a free-for-all.
Well, there are those in line with that same comment or question by Kayode. There are those, such as the governor of Rivers State, for instance, who would say that following the arrest of Nnamdi Kanu, look, it's not just Nnamdi Kanu, and some others will say it's not just Sunday Igboho. There are other elements, who have been, ravaging the nation, and some of them are known. You heard the famous Islamic cleric saying that anytime he went to see the bandits, he went with security escorts of state. So I'm just wondering if there was any further intelligence needed to pick up these people.
The army has even come out to say that they don't agree with what Sheikh Gumi was saying, so he can say his own. I don't know who escorts him there, but I don't think that the security agencies will allocate operatives to follow him into a bandit hideout, and then he will have meeting with them and come out. I don't think that's their way of reacting. So, intelligence will go around, and then when you have security agencies, they don't just jump into it. They have to gather and then, of course, look at it very well, reconfirm to make sure that it's a credible one before they go in to strike.
But, Mr. Makri, when he made this comment, a policeman was with him. So on that basis alone, this policeman got into his car with him and escorted him away. On that basis alone, shouldn't the cleric have been at least invited to have a conversation with him on his claims?
Well, I don't know this policeman that was with him. Remember, when you see a police escort with anybody, including big men, those people are not decision makers. Those might, even we might have situations where we have guns for hire. It's very, very common where we here have mopoles, who can be hired and followed. That does not mean that it was coming from the mainstream of authority in the police. So I don't know where he got it, but it might be even possible, I don't know because I'm no more in service, where there might be communication between Gumi and either the DSS or other police intelligence group.
You spoke about freedom of expression, and I think this is perhaps at the base or foundation of this case. This is a man that has canvassed for self-determination. Clearly, a lot of people, groups, are behind him on that issue of self-determination, saying, we want better. We want out. I mean, we can do better. And I mean, there's no sin in that. It's not illegal to at least ask for self-determination. And I mean, it was in a build-up to a rally in Lagos, which, by the way, the police has said should not hold. So there are questions about that freedom of expression. So let me just get your response to that. The police saying that that should not hold. Can we still say there's freedom of expression if people cannot say they want to hold a rally, not even a protest,
Yes.
a rally?
There should be freedom of expression, there should be freedom of speech, and I fully support it. In fact, from what is happening, including the arrest of Kanu, I think that the government itself should look further than that. There should be a deep dive and look into situations, the root causes, because right now what we're dealing with are the symptoms of what the real problems are. So if they do a deep dive, they will now look at those problems, that different agitations coming from different regions of the country. And I think they should do that. But freedom of speech is, I think, is guaranteed. But, you know, this same Lagos rally, of course, the police and the DSS have shared that same intel to show that this guy, although he's coming to Lagos, but he's been carrying arms. So we don't know what he's going to use them for.
Well, many will pick up on that part where you say you think freedom of speech is guaranteed being a former operative. But do you think that there should be a joint operation against bandits? Because there are many people who say, look, time and again, they know that bandits are also armed with AK-47 rifle, domiciled in pockets of bushes where they are.
Yes, of course. There have been joint operations between the DSS, the police, even the army. There's a joint operation even with NSCDC, you know. But I feel it's taking a long time, and it's taking a lot of manpower and resources. They should really face those people and take them out, because we're having, you know, it's not good for the country.
I mean, speaking of what's good for the country, I mean, there's certain actions that are taken, and you imagine the effect it will have across regions, within people, regarding stability, the peace, and the rest. With this action taken by the DSS, I mean, looking at the coming days, the comments you've heard from different groups, especially in the Southwest, Yoruba groups, what are the options you see? What are the things you see playing out in the coming days?
Well, I think the action of the DSS is preemptive, and then, of course, it's also a warning to all those who have been stockpiling arms in different parts of the country. One important thing is that we have Amoteku. You know, why is Sunday not operating with Amoteku? These are questions that should be asked, you know, but he is operating a separate thing, different from Amoteku. And then, of course, having all kinds of automatic weapons. So with all those kind of loaded magazines, that means it's ready for war. And I don't think that is the way to go. If people are going for self-determination, there are ways, there are peaceful ways of going about it.
But does this say anything that, I mean, over time, he has been peaceful about this? He has, and he said it time and again. People have actually said it, that he's always been peaceful about this. So does that at least lend some credence to his push for self-determination, that this is peaceful and not going to be violent?
Okay, if it is peaceful, then he should also go ahead and answer the question why all those caches of arms were found in his house. What was he planning to do with them?
Well, many will be looking to see how the authorities equally respond to threats posed by, several persons to those who are legitimately going to their farms. But I guess time will tell. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Makary, for your perspective today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so we might as well just jump in and take a look at some emails coming through from you. We have, well, let's see, where do we start off this morning? Muhammad says about DSS operations. The efforts being exhibited on Sunday Igboho should be extended to all the Boko Haram and bandit-infested areas. Enough of two sets of laws.
Well, Emmanuel, still on that raid, says, who gave them license or guns to defend themselves? These are criminals for all I care, he says.
And to Aderemi, DSS raid was unprofessional by all standards. The evidence presented also fell short of professionalism. Nigerian security operatives should learn the processes of effecting an arrest.
Augusta, talking about that same invasion, says, the news of the attack on Sunday Igboho came with mixed feeling. Sunday Igboho came to light due to the failure of the federal government to tame the killer herdsmen. The killer herdsmen and bandits are still going out freely with their arms and weapons, and no operation has been carried out by the DSS, despite knowing the location of the killers from Gumi. Is the DSS not concerned with the level of killings, rape, and kidnapping in Benue, Southern Kaduna, and other parts of the country? The action of the DSS is suspect. I hope it will not clear the way for the killer headsmen and bandits to overrun the Southwest.
That's a big question. Kenneth also, but this time on PIB, Census Mail, saying, while I agree that the passing of the PIB bill is a welcome development, I must add that the grammars and titles are not what the suffering inhabitants of the host communities need. Goes on to say their land, water, and environment in general are destroyed, making life more miserable for them. My point is this: let there be better life for all Nigerians, especially the inhabitants of the petroleum industry's host communities.
Well, Ahmed Shua on the same issue writes, the National Assembly has done a great job by passing the bill. This is one of the landmark achievements of this administration. Okay.
Olagunju Oladele says, the bill is 20 years late, but a welcome development, though. Communities should grow wealthy off the back of their oil and gas resources. We, on the other hand, have been pillaged by a lack of or little community tax and royalties. The industry must take responsibility for a source of resources.
Henry's Mail, still on the PIB, of course, which we discussed earlier, saying, kudos to the 9th National Assembly for the landmark achievement. He goes on to say, the executive should not waste this tall dream due to typos in the document or insignificant disagreement. Let the bigger picture of a properly governed and accountable petroleum sector guide actions of all. However, what do we do about the enemy called corruption? There's a question mark, and corruption, by the way, is in caps. If not fought squarely, all the lofty aspirations will never be realized.
To question, is that element also captured in the law?
Well, I mean, since it talks about governance, fiscal issues, and the rest, I think it's a given, right?
Mm. Well. So there you go. But the thing is, I don't know about that adjective, insignificant disagreement. I mean, if there are gray areas, as they say, it's part of the process to ensure they iron those out so that you have a smooth bill that may be largely acceptable, because you can't have any law that is 100% acceptable. That's why they keep amending laws the world over, really. We're all humans, so
I know.
Mistakes will always happen.
I think what might be significant to one person might be insignificant to another, and I think he's probably speaking from the Nigerian perspective. Like, all we want is just a better petroleum industry. You can sort yourself out there, but make sure we have a better industry for all.
Oh, yeah. So all eyes will be on that one to see what transpires with that. And then the Electoral Amendment Act, or the bill. So we'll see what happens. Well, that is the show today. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next week. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
I'm Kayode Okikelu.
And I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a wonderful weekend.